Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond or slave, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Or, of course, that's another way of saying 666, or 666. Now, here's what this is all about. We're told that a powerful leader called the beast out of the sea will be raised up in the last days. This will be after the saints of God are gone to be with him, and when he's turned this world over to its own judgment, to its baptism of fire, as Christ called it. This world's going to be subjected to a baptism of fire, which is generally known in the Bible as the time of the Great Tribulation. There's going to be a powerful leader raised up, and he's called the beast out of the sea because he comes up out of the nations. And then there's going to be another leader over the nation of Israel, and he's going to be called the beast out of the land. And he's that same personage that Zechariah, in the 11th chapter, Zechariah calls the evil shepherd, distinguished from the good shepherd. And in this 13th chapter, it tells at that time when these two evil men, powerful rulers, one subservient to the other, will hold sway, political sway, over this earth. And they're going to be so powerful that nobody will be able to buy anything or sell anything unless they let themselves be branded or marked with the mark. And it said that this mark is 666, so it's assumed that it literally be 3 sixes. It be stamped on, if you want to show off to everybody that you belong to him, well, you just have it put across your forehead. Or if you want to be secretive about it, they'll let you put it in the palm of your hand. But unless you can show that mark during this time, you will not be able to buy or sell. Now it says here in the 18th chapter, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. That would seem to indicate that it's possible to have enough understanding about the Scriptures that you know what this is all about, what the 666 stands for, and so forth. Well, some say that it's not possible for us to have any understanding about it at this time, that it simply means those who will be affected at that time will be the ones who will have understanding concerning it. Personally, I'm not willing to relegate it to those. I think that God will give us a degree of understanding in any age about his truths, because he says that he won't do anything unless he first tells his holy prophets, unless he reveals what's on his mind. God is in the business of revealing to people, under right conditions, what's going to happen in the future. Now, I made the statement last week that this had a bearing or a relationship to these chapters that we're studying in Daniel. And I want to show you the type of clue that you get which tends to tie one chapter in the Bible with another chapter and let you know that these chapters are closely related. In the first place, look at the fact in the 13th chapter here in the first verse. There are 10 horns. We're in Revelation 13:1. In the middle of the verse. There are 10 horns and 10 crowns. Well, we had 10 toes over where we were studying, didn't we? Let's go on down here. Let's look at the 4th verse. Revelation 13:4. And they worshipped the dragon and gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast. Look at verse 8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. And look at the 12th verse down Well, he exercises all the power of the first beast before him and causes the earth and them who dwell on it to worship the first beast. And again in the 15th verse, and he hath power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Now we can see here that the world leaders at that time are forcing the populace of the whole world to worship in their prescribed manner. There is a false, forced worship. Well, this is a contradictory term anyway. It's not possible to force somebody to worship. You might go through worship motions, but worship is something that comes from within, and it's part of the misunderstanding of Satan that he can force people to worship him. Well, this is anytime you see a forced worship, you can be sure that the power behind it is satanic. Remember when Christ was being tested by Satan? One of the things Satan said, if you will fall down and worship me, I will do so forth. Satan craves to be worshipped. Now, some people worship Satan. Out in California, there's a church of Satan. And there's a large group in Germany that call themselves, they sell themselves to Satan and expect him to favor them because they sell out to him. So there have always been people who actually worship Satan, but a little hard for people to worship Satan because part of the punishment that Satan has now is that he is not able to embody himself. So he's rather hard to identify so that you can worship him. So he gets people to worship anything except God. All false worship is satanic. So you can be sure that this false worship is satanic. We found 5 places in the 13th chapter of Revelation that speak of this forced false worship. Now let's go back to our Daniel scripture, chapter 3, and we can get a parallel. We're doing this for a reason, and you'll see the reason when we finish. Daniel chapter 3. Daniel comes right after Ezekiel, and just before Hosea. That'll help you find it at all. Daniel chapter 3, look at the 5th verse, about 2/3 the way through the 5th verse. Ye shall fall down and worship. 6th verse, and whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth. 7th verse, near the end of it. And the language, nation's language, fell down and worshiped the golden image. 10th verse, last line, shall fall down and worship the golden image. 11th verse, and whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth. 12th verse, the last phrase, nor worshipeth the golden image. 14th verse, latter part of it, nor worship the golden image. 15th verse, the last half, to fall down and worship the image which I have made, well, but if ye worship not. 18th verse, the last phrase, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Now here's 10 times we have this false, forced worship described. Now this is probably the only 2 books in the whole Bible that uses that phraseology so frequently. And it's the type of thing that God uses in the Bible to help you tie 2 scriptures together and helps you interpret the Bible. You can be sure that God had a reason for stressing that particular subject so many times. And so you can be sure that there's something in the 3rd chapter of Daniel that's very similar to the 13th chapter of Revelation. This is God's way of telling you. This is how He reveals to those who study His Word. You're reading the Bible and you say, you're just reading the Bible through, and you come to the 13th chapter of Revelation, and you see this emphasis on forced worship, and you see it repeated over and over again. You said, I've read something like that somewhere else in the Bible. And you look for it, you get a concordance or something, and you look that up, and you find where that is, and you begin to tie those 2 chapters together, and you begin to relate the chapters? Well, that's when you would discover in the first verse of the 3rd chapter of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 3 cubits. Now there was an image in the 13th chapter. Somebody made an image, and they were forced to worship an image. And here they're forced to worship an image. And the image was set up by the ruler, those places. And here you have, the height was 60 cubits, and the breadth was 6 cubits. Well, now you had a 66 over in the 13th chapter of Revelation, didn't you? You see, it's not a coincidence. It can't be a coincidence that so many like terms are interrelated there. So you can be very sure that the general subject matter in Daniel 3 is the same as the general subject matter in Revelation. Now, Revelation will probably be a fuller explanation, or that's what the word means, a revealing, a fuller revelation of the mystery that you found in Daniel. In Daniel was told to shut the book and seal it, because the prophecy was for a time not yet. But John in Revelation was told, don't shut the book. Let the people understand it. So Revelation is sort of an opening up. The book of Revelation is an opening up of those truths which have their foundation in the book of Daniel. Now, why have we been doing all of this that I've been doing tonight? It's to help you. It's to cause you, when you're reading the Bible, to look for this same type of thing. Now, we'll find it somewhere else. And you can tie subject matter together in this way, and so that you get a better understanding of what God is doing. These 2 chapters are talking basically about the same thing. Daniel is a foreshadowing. It's describing the world as Satan is the god of this world, and as he causes people to fall into line with what he wants done. And he knows how to take the political structure of the world, or the religious structure of the world, or the social structure of the world. He knows how to do that. He's smart enough to know how to handle it in such a way that man will think it's his deal. Like, remember, we read about the building of the Tower of Babel. Those people thought that was their idea, but it was Satan's idea. Eve thought that this was a good move on her part, but it was Satan that brought her to do that. So we have here then, in the 3rd chapter, as we explained, we have here man's opinion of his own abilities and man's worship of himself, really, because remember we said Nebuchadnezzar stands for man as he wants to rule himself apart from God, and as man culminates in the man, the number of a man. Remember the 666 says it is a number of a man, but it means the man. That is to say, the whole idea of man apart from God that culminates in the Antichrist. So we have here in Nebuchadnezzar a foreshadowing of Antichrist, except Nebuchadnezzar is a little more inclusive. He represents man as man finally culminates. But you're going to see how God is going to wean Nebuchadnezzar away from Satan's grasp, just as he's going to wean man one day away from Satan's grasp. So let's, now with that background, now that we see that in the 2nd chapter of Daniel we had a great statue, didn't we? And this was God's view of man and his ability to run his affairs. That is to say, he has a golden head, or a divine permission to have dominion over the earth. That's all right. That was given by divinity. But he has a clay, feet that are mixed with clay and iron, and they won't stick together, and they're going to crumble, and it's all going to fall down. Now that's God's view of man in the 2nd chapter. In the 3rd chapter, we have man's view of man. He sees himself as a great, huge, golden deity which everybody ought to pay attention to and obey. He's going to pull himself up by his own bootstraps, and he wants to run his own affairs, and man as an institution believes that he can eventually solve everything by his own humanitarian ideas. This is humanism, and we have it all over the place, that man through education and cultural advance and sociological advance eventually will get on top of this thing. But you see, man denies the authority of God and of Satan. And therefore, he's all fouled up, because since he denies the authority of God, God won't guide him. And since he denies the authority of Satan, and Satan's smarter than man is, this gives Satan the opportunity to rule man without man knowing it. You see, the greatest trick that Satan has is to convince man that Satan isn't. You'll see that man ridicules Satan. I don't know if you read a paper that has this little cartoon in it called Church Humor. There's a little cartoon in our local paper, and it's called Church Humor. Well, this last week, under Church Humor, what they had a devil with the horns and all, you know, speaking over a microphone. And the caption under it was that the networks had to give him equal time with Billy Graham. And they think that's funny, see. It's a ridicule. It really means that they don't really believe there is any such power to be. See, it's just a joke. Well, that's satanic in itself. And a person, until they're saved, they don't really have an awareness of Satan. Most people don't even believe there is a Satan, really, until they get saved, and then they don't have any doubts about it. It doesn't take you long after you're saved before you know there's a Satan. And you're in trouble believing that at all. But before you're saved, you do. He's just some sort of a character that somebody dreamed up. Well, now let's turn to the 4th chapter of Daniel and see what we have here. Starts out Nebuchadnezzar. That means it's going to talk about man again, and man's idea of something. Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all peoples and nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. Now this, we can recognize this right off the bat. See, Nebuchadnezzar stands for man, as man looks upon his destiny, as he would be. And man says, look, all people and nations and languages that dwell on the earth, if you'll look to me, or in my authority, you'll have peace. Peace be multiplied unto you. Well, after you're saved, you know, there's not any peace until there's not any peace in the world until the Prince of Peace rules from Jerusalem. But you can have peace within, because that same Prince of Peace will come to dwell within you. So but man thinks he can have peace. He goes around with peace signs, and our president even says that he believes this is the last war we'll ever be in. My, how blind can he be? The Bible says there'll be wars and rumors of wars right till the very end. But you can see this in the first verse here, that what Nebuchadnezzar stands for. Now here's how he expresses his thought, and this is man in his own thought. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. Now you see, man, in his most cultural state, acknowledges a higher being. And in fact, if man compliments himself by saying, I can recognize there's a designer. And probably there's never been a born atheist. And there probably aren't too many atheists in Russia even. You have to train yourself to be an atheist. And so, but man as such doesn't really think much of Russia, does he? I mean, the nations of the world, they acquiesce in one thing or another because Russia is powerful and all. But man doesn't think much of that. He'll recognize there's a God. He always has. Yeah, it's offbeat not to. Third verse. How great are his signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom and his dominion is from generation to generation. Nebuchadnezzar, you look, Nebuchadnezzar here sounds like a pretty good Christian, doesn't he? Well, this is man has a propensity for acting like he gives allegiance to God when he doesn't. But you don't have to go down here much further till you find out that this is just a sham. He's saying this in case there does happen to be a God. I want to pat him on the shoulder, and I want to let him know I'm on his side, and I want to placate him. This is man all over, you know. Just in case there is a God, I better play church a little bit and buddy up to him and flatter him a little bit. And see, man looks upon God and just thinks he thinks like human beings does. The very idea that you could flatter God. But you see it all the time. Now let's go on. 4th verse. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace, and I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts of my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Now notice, he's already found that all of his wise men couldn't interpret any dreams. And why didn't he call Daniel? Because he just won't admit, you see, that he hadn't got himself surrounded by his own. He didn't call for Daniel before until there was no hope from his own. Then came the magicians and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers, and Nebuchadnezzar says, I told them the dream to them, and they did not make known unto me its interpretation. But at the last, or finally, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar. Daniel is his Hebrew name. Belteshazzar is his Babylonian name. According to the name of my God, and in him, in whom is the merit of the holy God. See, Nebuchadnezzar, he said before that there was one high God, but then he says there's a lot of gods. He wants to be sure. He's like the Greeks, you know, that Paul came upon in Athens. Just in case there's more than one God, he doesn't want to make any of them mad. So they even had an altar there to an unknown God, just so they didn't leave any gods out. So Nebuchadnezzar's, and man's that way. He wants to make sure he doesn't leave any possibility of any divinity out, and so he's acknowledging, he's already been shown, see this, he's just gone through this deal with these three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he gave allegiance to their God, but now he's not a saved man here by any means. He just talks like the world talks, the religious world. And in whose spirit is the holy gods, and to him I told the dream. O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy God, see, he thinks Daniel's got so much wisdom there, it couldn't be just one God gave it all to him, you see. So he's here again, the holy God is in thee, and no secret troubles thee. Tell me the vision of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation of it. Thus were the visions of my head in my bed. I saw and beheld a tree in the midst of the earth. Now watch what this tree's all about. A tree in the midst of the earth, and the height of it was great, and the tree grew and was strong, and its height reached unto heaven, and the side of it to the end of all the earth. Its leaves were fair, and its fruit much, and in it was meat or food for all, and the beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heavens dwelt in its boughs, and all flesh was fed from it. Now this is how man sees his ability. Man thinks that he can eventually fix up this old world so there'll be no more hunger, and as soon as he gets it under his tree, under the shelter of his tree, to where there's enough culture and enough education and enough of his plans and so forth, that eventually this civilization, under man's own powers to do things for himself, will shelter everything on earth. And that's the way you'll have peace. It's sort of a United Nations without anybody having a veto power, you might say. And this is how man looks at his future and what he plans to do. But look at the 13th verse. Nebuchadnezzar says, I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and a holy one came down from heaven. And he cried aloud and said thus, hew down this tree, and cut off its branches, and shake off its leaves, and scatter its fruits. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls flee from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass or bronze, and the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. What do you think all this is about? Well, it says that this great tree, that someone from heaven is going to cut this great tree down right when man thinks it's going to blossom. And for 7 years, man is going to act like a beast. And that's what's going to happen. All of man's great ideas of bringing in an everlasting peace with everybody having plenty and everybody under the shelter of a benign government and everybody getting 100% medical care and everything else with a big brother type government looking over everybody, no more poverty, no more war, and all this. This is what this big tree is, you see. Everything takes shelter on it, and everything finds plenty to eat. But somebody from heaven is going to cut it down. But notice, the stump will be left. And the stump is going to be bound by a band of iron and a band of bronze. Now, we've already learned from the 2nd chapter what iron, the symbolic meaning of iron, is strong. And brass stands for judgment. And what it means is that this stump is going to be held and overpowered by somebody strong in judgment. It's going to be banded about with iron and with bronze, and it's going to come back to life, but under the terms of the holy watcher that came down. Notice he's going to hew it down. Now this is a phrase that's in the 14th verse, this hew down the tree. Now that's used quite often in the Bible. And it always speaks of the time when the wicked rulers of the earth are going to cease. See, the trees stand for the rulers of the earth. Remember when Christ says, when you see the fig tree bud and all the trees, this means the nations of the world and the rulers of the world. Now hold your place here in Daniel and look in Matthew chapter 3. You could read the same thing in Luke 3 if you wanted to, but we're going to look in Matthew chapter 3. And John the Baptist is describing the one that comes after him. He says, Matthew 3:9, think not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham as our father, for I say unto you that God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham. Now also the axe is laid unto the root of the trees. Over in Daniel it's seen as one tree because all the trees of the earth are going to culminate into one tree, see. This is the whole thought, that all the trees become this great tree. See, a tree gives shelter. And this is what a national government is supposed to do. Give shelter to those under its branches. Got the same deal. Now, also the axe is laid under the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. John the Baptist says, I indeed baptize you with water unto repentance, but he who cometh after me is mightier than I, whose shoes I am not worthy to bear. He shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost and with fire, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor and gather his wheat into the garner or granary, and he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. What is John the Baptist talking about? He's talking about Jesus Christ the baptizer. Now, Jesus Christ baptizes two ways. On the day of Pentecost, he baptized his infant church with the Holy Spirit. And that's the first thing. Then he's going to baptize his world with fire. That's the time of the tribulation. The same time he used down the trees. He uses this phrase again. You can find it again in the 7th chapter of Matthew. So he's talking about the same time, same thing, in the same instance. And if you relate these phrases like this, God does this to tie the Bible together for a Bible student. And this is how you find out what the Bible's saying about. You let the Spirit of God tie these phrases together for you, and you find them one place, and you find them another place, and then you begin to see how they relate one to the other. So there's going to be a time when the tree, that's the culmination of all the trees, will be hewn down. And the one that's going to hew it down is Christ himself, at what we know as the Battle of Armageddon. Well, when's this going to happen? It's going to happen over a 7-year period. This is what this 7 times means in the 16th verse. All right, we're back in Daniel, the 4th chapter, the 17th verse. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the Holy Ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. Now, why this verse explains to us why all of this is taking place. That somehow man has to learn eventually that he doesn't make his own tree. That God rules over this earth, and if man wants to rule, and God wants man to rule, but man must rule under God, and not in opposition to God, or not without regard to God. But he must rule under God, and man will not believe that lesson. He'll not learn it, and he's never going to learn it until the time of the Great Tribulation, when this world receives its baptism of fire and the tree is cut down. And it's obvious that it doesn't shelter anybody. How could a tree shelter anything or have any influence when it's just a stump? And that's why it's a Holy One that cuts it down. And it says that it's going to remain that way until man recognizes that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and it says that one way that God does this, he'll set up over man the basis of men. That's that same man you read about in Revelation 13. The number of a man is 666. That's this basis of men. 18th verse. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation of it, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in thee. Now if the kings of this world, the present political rulers of this world, would only realize that the wisest men that they can call in have no ability to interpret God's purposes to them. Now see here, God has shown Nebuchadnezzar what's going to happen, hasn't he? But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't understand it. Well, neither do the princes of this world understand it. The rulers of this world. And they can call in all of their wise men, and they'll never know. Unless they call in a man of God. And they won't listen to him until they have to. King Nebuchadnezzar says, well, I called in my smartest men, and they didn't know what this was all about. I don't know. And the greatest rulers of the world today will admit to you they don't know what the future holds. It's all a pipe dream. They hope that they'll be able to do something, and they don't really know. And as a matter of fact, when they get their worst trepidations is when they call in their wise men. Don't you sometimes listen to these TV programs where the political leaders call in some wise sages, the presidents of the biggest colleges and such as that, and ask them to give an interpretation of the outcome of certain things. Boy, I saw a special, CBS special, several weeks ago, and I guess it was Walter Cronkite was asking all of these. They had the smartest scientist in the world and the smartest educator in the world. They held him up as this. They said, this man has more brains, he's recognized as having more brains about political matters than anybody else in the world, and this is the leading educator in the world. I think he was the big university president, maybe Harvard or the University of Chicago or somewhere. And he had all the wheels, and then he started asking these questions. And I listened. And I'm telling you, when one of them big wheels got through talking, you know what you wanted to say? And you want to say, what did he say? Because it was just really good. And he hedged everything he said. Now, I thought, if this is what humanity is depending upon, why don't they all go bury their heads like an ostrich? Because these fellas haven't said anything. If this is the smartest people on earth, and they are the ones that's supposed to have the answer, and this is their answer, then everybody better go jump off of a cliff, because they sure didn't have any answers. Well, that's what Nebuchadnezzar says, because they don't have any answers. 19th verse. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonied or perplexed for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or its interpretation trouble thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation of it to thine enemies. Daniel says, now remember, every time we read Daniel Belteshazzar here, it's the same person. He's got two names now. They didn't like his Hebrew name, so they gave him one from their country, and so sometimes you had him call one name and sometimes the other. But Daniel says, King, you know what? This interpretation is about something you're not going to like so well, because it has to do with your enemies. And you say, I thought God was going to bring you. You mean God is the enemy of man? No, but you see, the enemy of man's soul is Satan, and whoever he raises up. And God is permitting man to be controlled by man's enemy, because man will not give himself to God. 20th verse. Here's old Daniel going to tell him what it's all about. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached into heaven, and the sight of it on all the earth. You see, this world's going to be ruled by one government as soon as we get taken out of here. It's going to have one ruler. This is the culmination of that. Whose leaves are fair and its fruit much. In it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowl of the heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reached into heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. See, man wants dominion. God says man's to have dominion, but man wants dominion without God, and God's going to give it to him for 7 years. And it's going to be the worst time man ever had when he has dominion. But God gives it to him. 23rd verse. And whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven and saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of its fruit in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass and the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, shall 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord the king, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee eat grass like an ox, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee. That means 7 years. Pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will. Now what Daniel is saying, now this actually happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He lost his mind, and even secular history records this, that he went crazy and thought he was an animal. And 7 years later, he got his senses back. and they gave him the kingdom back. Well, this is what's going to happen to man. See, man's supposed to have dominion, but he won't have dominion under God, so God's going to make a beast out of him. This is why these personages in Revelation are called the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the land. Man is going to become bestial to its nth degree, and he's going to be like beast for 7 years. Till, look at the last phrase again, the 25th verse. Till thou, man, knows that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and give it to whomever he will. 26. Whereas thou commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee after thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. Says now, I'm not going to wipe mankind off the face of the earth. I'm just going to destroy him in his fruitfulness until he recognizes who his master is. 27th verse. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, and if there may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. Daniel says to mankind, look, if you would be perfectly righteous, maybe God wouldn't do this to you. 28th verse. Let's see how Nebuchadnezzar reacted to this. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar, and at the end of 12 months he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. Now and the king spoke. Now we're going to see what he says. Now notice back in the 4th chapter, the early verses, see, the first verse he said, the king spoke there, remember, and there he said, to all peoples and nations and languages that dwell in the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show. It sounds like he's extolling God, doesn't it? But he's extolling God only as he thinks he can use God, because look at his real thoughts over here in the 30th verse. The king spoke and says, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and by the honor of my majesty? See, man talking, he gives a lip service to God, but he really thinks that he's his own wheel, you know. I've built up this great... Look how man is advanced. Look at the scientific wonders of man. Look what man can do. Look how education is progressed. There's more scientists alive today than there ever was in the history of the world. Man has made more progress in the last 50 years than he made all the centuries. Man is on the ascendancy. He's conquered outer space, and he's really headed for things. Man really is proud of man. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar is saying here, see. I've built all of this. He stands for man, you know. 31st verse. While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. And that's what's going to happen to mankind. With the word of the mouth. This is why Christ is characterized in Revelation as being the one out of whose mouth came the sharp two-edged sword. And that's why he's called, the word of God is called the sword of the Lord. 32nd verse. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass like an oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, and thou shalt know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will. That's about the 4th or 5th time that's been said. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and he did eat grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, now he's got a changed heart. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar got saved. Did you know it?
Praise the Lord.
He got saved. And because, you see, he portrays man who as a race is going to be saved in the end. It doesn't mean all of mankind, but we're not going to be wiped out as a race. No, and Nebuchadnezzar represents us jointly. But when you get to heaven, you can shake hands with old Nebuchadnezzar. Now, you didn't know you wanted to up to this point, did you? Because you didn't act too good. You see those boys in that fiery furnace and all that, you know. But man's like that. He'll throw his fellow man right into the fiery furnace if the fellow man doesn't do what he wants him to, you know. But let's see what happened to old Neb here. At the end of the days, that is, after that 7-year period of tribulation, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. At last, man is going to have true understanding. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him who liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. Remember, it said that was going to happen to Nebuchadnezzar until he acknowledged just this. Now he's acknowledged it. And one day man's going to acknowledge it. But it won't be after till he lives as a beast for 7 years. Oh, isn't it marvelous how this Bible ties itself all together and explains itself from one place to the other? It couldn't be man's work, could it? Oh, how could man think up something like this? Well, how come these smart fellows can't? There's us stupid somebodies like us, just stupid old country people, can understand that man just wouldn't make words like this. How come the smart ones can't? Well, we don't even know how to speak good English. 35th verse. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. Man's going to acknowledge eventually that he's nothing. That's what Paul said, he was nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say unto him, What doest thou? In other words, old Nebuchadnezzar is really extolling God. 36th verse. At the same time my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom mine honor and my brightness returned to me, and my counselors and my lords sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now this speaks of the time when man will fulfill that which God wants him to fulfill. When he acknowledged that his dominion is under God, then he'll extol God, and he'll have an excellency. And David came to that future in time and says, Oh God, what is man? Thou art mindful of him. Thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and so forth, you know. And David foresaw this time, and he sung a song in the 8th Psalm. 37th verse. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of all heaven, King of heaven, all whose works are true, and his ways, judgment and justice, and those that walk in pride he is able to obey. Well, he really ought to know some experience, hasn't he? So you see, this is the history, the pre-written history of what's going to happen to man's systems. So we've seen this 4th chapter speaks of what man thinks of human culture, of human technological advance, scientific advance, all of that which man extols about his own accomplishment. That's what's depicted in this vision in the 4th chapter of Daniel. And you know what you're going to see in the 5th chapter? You're going to see what God thinks of man's social order. That's what you're going to see in the 5th chapter. What God thinks of man's social order. And then, in the 6th chapter, you have the story of Dan and the lion's den. You've heard that many times in Sunday school. You'll skip over that. You don't skip over it, you read it. But we'll go on to the 7th chapter after we finish with doing a little bit on the 5th. And we're going to see again what God thinks about man's political history through the years. What he thinks of that. And we're going to tie that in some more. So we'll spend a little time in Daniel. Try to relate it to some of the other Bibles. You know. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you again for your marvelous, marvelous word, and how you are willing to let us take a few little peeks into it. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Now we've got a few minutes left here. I knocked off a little early because I thought we covered quite a bit. You might have some questions you might like to ask.
You were talking about people worshiping Satan. Who stayed on my back so much today?
No, he's not mine. Now, Brother Payne, he never even bothered you till you got saved, did he?
No.
That's my shoulder all the time. He's got a lot of lieutenants.
That's true. He has one-to-one deal with that. The third.
Anybody have any comments or rejoinders or contradictions? Or?
Is a hewn down the same as the wicked shall be cut off? Does that mean the same thing in the rest of the Bible?
No, you see, it's a little different. It's a little different because the wicked shall be cut off entirely. That is from the standpoint of God's program. But the human race will be cut down, but you leave the stump. Just like you remember when Jesus Christ cursed the fig tree that had leaves and no fruit, he cursed it down to the root. That was the nation of Israel. But the roots are coming up again, you know. He didn't utterly obliterate it. Just cut it down. They were showing things and they didn't have any fruit.
This tree is actually going to be cut down during the 7-year period of tribulation.
That's right. That's when the tree will be cut down.
You know, there is reading the Bible, unless I had someone like you to explain it, well, let's just read right on through that, and they couldn't find that stuff in.
Well, Brother Taylor, it's not human abilities. Well, of course, God does call out certain people to help explain this, but you can learn a lot of it yourself when you become familiar enough with the Bible. It just takes a lot of time reading and studying, and not very many people are willing or able or something to spend that much time. It takes a lot of concerted effort. You have to give up some things if you're going to really have the Spirit of God reveal these things to you so that you can recount them to someone else. And that's why God graciously gives some people a special desire and gift to do this, because He knows as a whole we just won't spend that much time. We just won't. There's just certain TV programs we're going to see now. They're our favorite programs, and we're not going to give them up. And there's certain hobbies we have, and we enjoy them, and they have to have a certain amount of our time.
I've read the Bible through once, and read portions of it lots of times, but I did not know how to study it since I've been hearing you.
You know, you said a while ago, why don't these intellectuals know it's because they don't have the Holy Spirit?
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right, Brad. You make an A on the test.
Ecclesiastes 8:17 says that I beheld all the work of God, and the man did not find out the work that is done under the sun, because though a man labor to seek it out, yet he shall not find it. Yea, farther, though a wise man think to know it, yet shall he not be able to find it.
That's right, isn't it? No, the Lord has to just reveal it to you.
You know, I was just thinking about one of the main things I watch on TV now, the news meetings, because it's like, I don't even look at the paper anymore. And this evening, in the 6-hour tirade that they had in opening the political borough of Congress, or whatever they call over there, that they're going to have for the next 10 days, and they've got about 80 countries represented with the Commonwealth world, that he told Israel, in this speech, he told Israel that if they didn't back up to their original line, that they would be like the dust they were sitting on over there. And I just, just went through my mind, oh, buddy, you just opened your mouth once too often. I think the dust is going to come from out there and drown you out.
Well, we know what God says about it, don't we?
You know, it does. You can't help but smile or something like that.
Right.
Kind of frustrating mind, oh, buddy, you're in for it. You don't know if you're in for it.
Even though the United States is half-heartedly upholding the Egyptians, really they're not cutting away from the Israelites either. I'm so proud of that. They're not going to get after them.
No, they're asking them to back up a little
You got
bit.
some of the people that want to ride the fence with that thing.
Did I show you all that? I think I showed you that verse that I found in Isaiah 54.
Anybody that follows Jesus is down at the end for it. or backs up.
Therefore, we need to, but in reality, the United States is extremely highly Egypt at the showdown.
Well, it seems to indicate in Ezekiel 39 that when Russia invades Israel, that it says all the young lions of Tarshish shall say, hey, you're going to try to take us for. In other words, they're going to interfere only with words, but they're not going to do anything about it physically. We'll protest, but we won't try to stop them. People want to know, are we going to get in a war over Israel? Well, my understanding is that when Russia goes and invades Israel, that we will protest, but we won't interfere.
We might even give them a few little arms, and so what, we still won't get up here on the
That's when God's going to open up the mountains
That's right. Well, that's what all this Vietnam is about. You see, God is so wonderful. What He does, He has something clear, the other side of the world, and everybody's eyes is focused on it. But you see, Vietnam is the setup to keep the nations of the world from trying to interfere with Russia, because God wants to handle that Himself. And you see, if Russia had tried to do anything to Israel before we had this Vietnam business, well, we'd have jumped right in there, hands and foot. But you see, the American populace, through the Vietnam situation, they have got themselves in a state of mind where they won't fight for anything. In fact is, the average, if you notice, the average thought of the average intellectual American now is, I'd rather be red than dead. That's right. If the average intellectual America, the average educator in your college had a choice, you can die or be ruled by communism, they says, I'll take the communism. And 10 years ago, you couldn't found 1 in 20 that would have said that. Well, I might be dead, but I'm not going to be red. That would be what Americans would have said. But they don't say, as a nation, as a group of people. Of course, there's a lot of individuals that would rather die than be ruled by communism. But as a nation, we have passed the point where, as a nation, that we will fight rather than to be ruled by something. It's just like old Chamberlain. We've got to the point where we're peace at any price, whatever it is. Peace in our time, whatever the cost. We've made up our minds that we're going to have peace as a nation, and nothing's going to stop that. And you see, this is why Nixon was able to say what he did about we wouldn't be involved in the war. You're not going to be able to get the American people up to a war again. And all the politicians you hear, they say that they'll never get involved in another war that the populace is not behind. And you're not going to get the populace. I don't care what people do to this nation. And the enemies of this nation are soon going to find it out. But we have a national psychosis now that we are not going to fight, even defend our own selves, whatever.
Look at this fellow that they're trying to put up to the death penalty now on that Calais or whatever. Yeah. Now this has been going on for every war that's ever happened. Every war that's ever happened.
He won't get to that.
But everybody's jumping on him. Not that I agree that he was right, but he didn't have to be over there. And this is happening in every war, through back to who knows when.
I'm sure that one of God's main purposes in involving us in Vietnam is to get us in the state of the mind where we wouldn't think we were such weirdos that we had to interfere with what He's going to be doing over there in the Mideast. And we see we've learned our lesson now. We want to stay in our own bailiwick.
Yeah, between Korea and Vietnam, we've had it.
Yeah, we've had it. And they can fight as they want to, but we won't even. I see this country just going into gradual disarmament. And we won't fight for anything.
We fight for all right.
No, we won't. We won't fight for anything. We're going to have
God
peace.
can tell you anything like that.
We're going to have peace.
When there was no peace.
Well, good to know what this book says, isn't it?
We don't want to write. No, human rights, but it's
And this was the end of this tape.